Our featured guest tonight is a television producer who truly left his mark on the business. For years, his show Laugh-In was the #1 show on television and helped shape America and American comedy forever after. He's worked with everyone who was anyone in the business at that time, from Goldie Hawn to Cher to Frank Sinatra to Lily Tomlin. Here to chat about his amazing career and new book, Still Laughing, is none other than producer George Schlatter. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to see you again.
So, George, you've obviously went on to become one of the best producers in show business. What did your parents think of it all when you told them you were going to show business?
I never really told them. It's just that I did that. I failed at everything else, and the show business was my last possible choice. But my mother was a concert violinist, and so I grew up with music, and humor was my salvation. Humor was my trapdoor. I could escape. So laughing was the solution for everything.
So, Laugh-In being what it was, it made me think, growing up in, I guess, East Aurora and so many other places, were there ever any opportunities you had? What was the closest you'd ever gotten up to that point to actually meeting or seeing a star or celebrity at that point?
Well, I mean, East Aurora was where my mother was and so forth. And I came from East Aurora and I wound up in St. Louis and Missouri Valley College and football scholarships and so forth. Anyhow, I wound up in Hollywood and I got a job wrapping window cards for piano players. And so then I kind of failed up until eventually I got a job at Ciros, which was a leading nightclub on Sunset Blvd. And there was a thing that it ran in the paper that I'd been a bouncer at Ciro's, and my wife, Jolene, hated that. So we released a story that I'd been an executive in charge of emergency departures, which sounded better than bouncer. But I went on from there, and then eventually came into television.
It is kind of wild to think that, I mean, you were there almost kind of at the beginning of television, which I think was like early 50s. What was it like working in the medium in its infancy? I mean, were you guys literally creating the art form in real time?
Yeah, the technology didn't exist, and television was pretty much variety shows, and you did the show. You showed up and you did a live show, and it was exciting and it was dangerous. And so then eventually when videotape came in, it became still an adventure, but safer,
Yeah. Now, your time in the business producing shows, variety specials, working with bands and record labels and so on, you've worked with like so many of the luminaries of that age. And the one that shines brightest for many of us, you mentioned before the interview started, was Frank Sinatra. How did that relationship come about, and what do you remember about the first time you met the man himself?
Well, it was an adventure, and I met him when I was working at Ciro's, and he'd come in, and he always had a group of people around him, and he had an aura of danger, and he also loved to laugh, and so we met. I think probably the first time maybe was when I was at Ciro's. And I think he came in, as a matter of fact, he came in one night at Ciro's with Judy Garland. And we had a press agent that was a real pain in the ass. And he walked in, and Judy Garland was pregnant, and Sinatra walked in, and he said, "Who's the broad with Sinatra?" And Sinatra said, "Excuse me," took him, put him into a phone booth, punched him, and closed the door and said, "The lady's name is Garland." But that was my first encounter, really, with Sinatra, punching our press agent. He was an adventure. Every time we met was another adventure. And the thing, my secret with Sinatra, the reason we got along so well, is I made him laugh. And if you could make him laugh, you could do anything. But it was a dangerous way to pass the time, making him laugh, because you never knew whether or not he was going to think it was funny. Fortunately, I made him laugh.
So you mentioned earlier some of the shadier people, and you're one of the last people of a certain era and generation who I will probably ever be able to ask this question. But how influential or not was, like, say, the mob when it came to entertainment in those days? I mean, both from your nightclub days and onward, it seems you wound up, like you said, in and around a lot of some of the players in those days, including people like Mickey Cohen and John Stompanato.
Well, mob was a misnomer. Mob indicates a large group of people. Actually, they were a series of different individuals, most of them from a different city, and they took care of everything, and it was much cleaner then. But then when I married Jolene, she didn't want to hear any more about those people, so that was all behind me. When I came to do the book, right? Martha Bose, who worked for me, took all these notes from all the stories that I would tell people when they came by and typed up all of those notes and then gave them to John Max, who took out all of the stories about those people. And so it became, Still Laughing became a very clean book of my wonderful memories, all of which were repeatable. Many of my memories are not in the book because of Jolene and Martha. But it's been quite a life. You know, when you figure how old I am, you'd think that I would have had a lot of adventures, and I did.
Well, also in and around the people that you're with. You know, back to Frank for a second. You talk glowingly about Frank in that book. What made that relationship so special for you, and how did you, as a producer, manage to manage the man and his known changing moods?
Frank Sinatra had the aura of danger, and everybody was kind of in awe of Sinatra. And I early on realized if I could make him laugh, I could get by with anything. So the secret of my relationship with Frank was making him laugh. And
So that was it, even managing him in
broke
any of
that
those
tension.
situations.
That's right. It just broke that coil, you know. And so everybody was kind of afraid of Frank, but if you could make him laugh, you could get by with anything. And
Just kill him with humor.
up until his funeral, when Barbara Sinatra said to me, she wanted me to do one of the eulogies. And I said, Barbara, please, I don't want to do that. She said, you have to do a eulogy. So I said, okay. So I went to go up I said, as long as I don't have to follow Gregory Peck. So sure enough, Gregory Peck, and now then the bishop introduced me. And so I didn't know what to say. So I said, thank you, Your Honor. I'd met a lot more, police or judges than I'd met bishops. So anyhow, that cracked it up, and it made the whole Sinatra funeral a little funnier. But that was my relationship with Sinatra was bumpy. It was exciting. It was dangerous. But boy, was it fun. He was a very, very special guy. One time Don Rickles was going to appear at the Slate Brothers. And so I took Frank in to meet Don Rickles, which was an unbelievable meeting because Frank had never seen anything like this. And so Rickles made him laugh. And from then on, they had a relationship. And so the secret with Sinatra was humor. Because then it was danger. He was dangerous, yes, and he knew a lot of dangerous people. But if you could make him laugh, the world lit up.
Judy, you mentioned Judy Garland earlier, and she was another who had a reputation who might have been periodically challenging to work with. And yet you found success and built a wonderful relationship with her as well. Is it true you threatened to drown her the first time she started snapping at you on a set?
Well, it was a secret with Judy was also making her laugh, and so she was a coiled thing like this, and everybody was afraid of Judy, so I realized if you could put her out there and make her laugh, break that coil, you could get by with anything, a lot like Frank, and so it was always making Judy laugh, and when she laughed, the world laughed. And I cherished the times I had with Julie, but that was also dangerous times because you never knew whether she was going to show up or not, and who was going to show up because she was different people.
The comedy's not lost on me. I mean, I know there was a story about maybe her running after you with the lamp or something like that. And the comedy's not lost on me imagining America's darling running after you with a lamp. And it was so, how did that story come about?
Well, we were doing something, and what happened was she was very, very vulnerable to any kind of fatulation. And if you played that sound for Judy, she cracked up. And so she was being very difficult at one time, and I played that sound, and she cracked up, and she said, I'm sorry. So I said, see that it doesn't happen again. And she reached up and grabbed a lamp and pulled it off the wall. And she chased me out of her dressing room down the hallway with this lamp. And the idea of me, who desperately wanted to do the Judy Garland show, having blown it with one comment, being chased by this legend with a lamp, cracked me up, and I just fell down laughing, and she fell down laughing. So the whole episode lasted only a few minutes, but she was so special, and she was magic. But the secret with Judy was breaking that coil, and that, again, as with Frank, if you could make her laugh.